Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be looking into something that I find super fascinating. It's kind of a big deal in the tech world, and it has to do with how countries interact and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, this is
And we're talking about the expansion of TSMC, the Taiwanese chip maker, TSMC, and they're expanding right here in Arizona. Yeah. So we're going to unpack why this is happening and kind of what it could mean for all of us.
Yeah, and when we say expansion, we really mean massive expansion. We're talking about TSMC is committing $100 billion to build 3 brand new chip foundries in Arizona and an R&D center. That's where they're going to be, innovating and coming up with all the new chip tech, and 2 advanced packaging facilities.
Okay, so this
isn't like out of the blue either. This is on top of a previous pledge of $65 billion for 3 more foundries, and one of those is already operational.
Wow. Yeah, it's pretty amazing the scale of this. I mean, it's just it's a huge investment.
It grabs your attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And, beyond the impressive numbers, the thing that I think we should be asking is, why is this happening on such a grand scale?
Yeah.
And what are the ripple effects that this could have? It's more than just new factories being built. It touches on the future of technology that powers all of our lives and the complex relationships between countries and how they interact with each other.
Right.
So our mission in this deep dive is to look beyond the headlines and to, really get into what the core motivations are for this and the potential impact this project could have.
Exactly. And, we've got some key players to consider here. We have Taiwan's president, William Lai-Ching-te, Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs, and, of course, TSMC themselves. And by understanding what each of these, stakeholders are saying, we can start to piece together, a clearer picture of what is motivating this undertaking.
Okay. Sounds good. So where should we start?
Let's start with Taiwan's perspective.
Yeah.
President Lai-Ching-te, he's described this Arizona project as the quote-unquote best model for building chip supply lines that do not rely on China.
Oh.
All right. So that in itself is a really interesting statement.
Yeah.
But I think for our listeners, the weight of that statement will become much clearer when we think about the larger geopolitical landscape that this is all happening in.
Okay. So kind of give us some context on that.
Sure. What's particularly important here is that China claims Taiwan as its own. And there's this persistent threat of potential military action by China against Taiwan.
Right.
And that's kind of always, looming in the background.
Yeah.
So when President Lai makes a statement about, creating chip supply lines that aren't dependent on China, it's not just about economic diversification. It's really fundamentally linked to Taiwan's national security. By establishing, significant advanced chip production outside of Taiwan, outside of that potential conflict zone, it lessens the risk associated with any disruptions that might happen, should something happen in that region.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's a form of strategic de-risking.
Yeah, like an insurance policy.
Exactly.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. So it wasn't just, a verbal statement either. President Lai actually met with Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs to discuss this collaboration. Yeah. That seems to emphasize how important this is to Taiwan.
Absolutely. That face-to-face meeting, that really high-level meeting between those two, really underscores the deep commitment that Taiwan has to this particular vision. And it fosters this really direct link between Taiwan and Arizona within this really vital industry.
Yeah, no, I want to shift gears a bit and talk about TSMC's position in all this. Because we've heard a lot of talk in the past, about the U.S. wanting to bring chip manufacturing back to the U.S.
Yeah.
So what does TSMC say about why they're investing so heavily in Arizona?
So TSMC has consistently stated that this expansion in Arizona is driven primarily by customer demand. So it's not just about political pressure from the United States. It's about what their customers need, and their customers are seeking more geographically diverse and secure sources for these essential components.
Right.
So the desire to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. might align with this.
Yeah.
But TSMC is really framing it as a direct response to market needs.
Okay, so they're saying, hey, our customers want this.
Exactly. Our customers want this, and we're going to deliver.
We're going to deliver it. Okay. And it's interesting because they're also making a point of saying that these U.S. plans won't impact their operations in Taiwan.
This is really crucial to understand. TSMC really wants to emphasize that it's still committed to Taiwan, where they have this, massive R&D presence, like 10,000 employees working on the cutting edge of chip technology, including 1 nanometer chips. So a nanometer is a billionth of a meter.
Wow.
Tiny, tiny features on these chips.
It's hard to even imagine.
Pushing the absolute limits of what is possible. And this is what highlights Taiwan's dominance currently in advanced chip production.
Right.
They hold over 90% of the global market share. So TSMC is saying we're expanding our global footprint, but we're not abandoning our home base.
Okay.
Our home base is still going to be critical for innovation.
Okay, so from Taiwan's perspective, it's about strategic supply chain security.
Yeah.
And TSMC is saying it's all about customer demand and reiterating their, commitment to Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about Arizona. Governor Hobbs seems pretty happy about all this.
Oh, yeah. Governor Hobbs is thrilled. She's describing Arizona as on its way to becoming, quote, America's hub for advanced manufacturing. And if you look at the projected job creation numbers, these are really significant. An estimated 40,000 construction jobs over the next 4 years just to build these facilities, and then tens of thousands of long-term, high-paying tech and manufacturing jobs once those facilities are operational.
40,000 construction jobs. That's huge.
Yeah, that's a
That's a huge immediate impact.
Yeah, a major impact on the state and a transformative opportunity for the state's economy.
And then those ongoing tech and manufacturing jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's really going to solidify Arizona's position in, the future economy.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, you can see why Governor Hobbs is so excited about it.
Yeah, and beyond just the direct employment benefits, you have billions of dollars in investment flowing into the state.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to have a really broad positive impact on the Arizona economy. It's going to support other businesses, drive further development. And Governor Hobbs even specifically mentioned how important this project is for advancing AI and other, important cutting-edge technologies.
Yeah, so it really seems like a big win for Arizona. Jobs, economic growth, a boost to their tech standing.
Sure.
And you mentioned earlier the meeting between President Lai and Governor Hobbs.
Mm-hmm.
She also said that this is going to strengthen the ties between Arizona and Taiwan.
Yeah, and that's another really key connection to consider here. So we've got these economic drivers, we've got this cutting-edge technology, and then we have these complex international relations all coming together in this project in Arizona.
Yeah.
Now, it's important to understand that at the federal level, the U.S. does not officially recognize Taiwan as an independent country.
Right.
However, it remains Taiwan's strongest international supporter and biggest provider of defense equipment. So this TSMC project in Arizona really helps to deepen those connections, but at a state level, creating a tangible economic link between the two.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it adds another layer to this already complex relationship.
So this brings us to, President Lai's mention of a quote-unquote non-red supply chain. What exactly does that mean?
So if we kind of zoom out and look at the big picture, the idea of a non-red supply chain is about reducing reliance on suppliers that are based in China. And this is particularly important in sectors like semiconductors, which are strategically, vital.
Mm-hmm.
Given the current, geopolitical climate and the ongoing, complexities between the U.S. and China, this has become a really key strategic goal for many nations.
Yeah.
Semiconductors, they're the foundational element of so many industries, from the smartphones that we all use to advanced defense systems.
Right.
So ensuring a secure and reliable supply is absolutely essential.
So it's all about diversifying risk
Mm-hmm.
so that a potential geopolitical event doesn't cripple entire industries.
Precisely. And this move by TSMC to Arizona really addresses that concern. It's a tangible step towards building a more resilient and diverse global supply chain for these critical components. Mm-hmm. But we should also note that building a completely non-red supply chain is not easy because China holds a dominant position in parts of that technology supply chain. Mm-hmm. And establishing alternatives that are comparable can be expensive, and they require the development of those comparable capabilities elsewhere.
It's not as easy as just, picking up and moving everything.
Right.
Okay, well, this has been really interesting. So I guess the last thing to talk about is, what are the key takeaways that we should remember from this?
Well, the most significant thing, I think, is that this $100 billion commitment from TSMC is a substantial move towards diversifying the production of advanced semiconductor chips away from that potential geopolitical risk zone of the Taiwan Strait.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't just driven by, one factor. It's a combination of factors.
Right.
Strong demand from customers who want more secure supply chains and a strategic vision to reduce risk.
Right.
So this strengthens the economic and perhaps diplomatic ties between Taiwan and Arizona. But it also firmly establishes the U.S. as a growing force in the semiconductor industry after, decades of much of that manufacturing happening overseas.
So it's a lot more than just building factories.
Yeah.
It's about strategically changing, the global global technology landscape and mitigating some of those risks.
It's a long-term strategy with profound implications for, technology, global economics, international relations.
Well, this has been really insightful. And given the scale of this project and the long-term nature of it, here's something for you all to think about at home. So with all this rapid innovation in chip design and manufacturing and the geopolitical landscape, always shifting and changing, what unexpected breakthrough or major global event do you think could reshape the semiconductor industry even further in the coming decades? That's something to really keep an eye on.
Yeah, for sure. It's a really dynamic space.
And we'll be here to cover it. So thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive, and we'll see you all next time.
See you later.